Hey, happy Sunday, everybody.
Yo. You want to see what my Sunday looked like?
Yeah.
This is the morning of my Sunday. Zoom in. Oh, hold on. Let me turn that down.
Hold on. Works at all.
I don't know. Here, is that better? Yeah!
Oh, my God.
She in some sort of fight club?
Yeah, dude. She walked in, and the first thing the nurse said was like, whoa, is she an MMA fighter? She took a header on her sister's bunk bed, and it's funny because they have all the questions that they have to ask when they're like, oh, that's weird. Here, if this makes you feel better, this is she's happier after her head got glued shut. Hold on, there we go. But yeah, dude, we had to walk in and they have all the questions they have to go through. Like, okay, she's not been drinking. Okay, was not in a fight. Okay, but she ate it. And and they asked her, like, you know, part of it was to assess whether or not she's had a concussion. They wanted to know whether or not she's blacked out or vomited or anything. And so they asked her, like, so what happened? And Calliope's sitting on the bed with her little blanket, and she goes, well, I was on Josie's bunk bed, and then I hit my head, and I said, ah, and then Penny came in, and Penny said, oh my God, and then she started running in circles, and then Dad said, Penny, stop running in circles. That's not helping. And then, so they're all like, you know, doing the eye thing, and they're like, yeah, I think she's all right. But that was
In what they remember.
Well, what was funny was it was one of those, like, just as I was headed out the door, like I'd put on the biking gloves, the helmet, the shoes, and all that stuff, and I was like, well, I guess and I hear the scream, and I walk up, and I'm, you know, Bonnie is of course freaking out, and it's like I'm patiently taking off the gloves, changing the shoes, because I already see the script for the next 6 hours.
I just like the idea that if you having these gloves that look kind of like fingerless boxing gloves showing up at the hospital with a wounded child.
I should have kept them on. And I was just like, hey, man, we got to fix this girl or what?
Tape her up. She's got another round.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, she ain't done yet.
She's going 3 rounds with Bruno tonight.
So anyway, that was my day. And then I did, and then like, I don't know, like at 2:00, because that was the whole thing is I was trying to get out before it hit 100 degrees or whatever. You know, it's, we're in the time now where it's like, if there's not a certain hour by which I'm on the bike, it's not going to happen. But then I was just like, yeah, I'm definitely just going to go for a very short ride afterward.
Yeah. All right, guys. We good to go?
Yeah. Wait, real quick. Can you say anything about the novel that's due today?
It's the 3rd Jessica Blackwood book.
Oh, yes. Ooh.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Exciting.
Second one, we find out in like 2 weeks, nominated for the Thriller Award.
What? That is awesome.
Oh.
Alrighty. Well, I'm looking good over here. You guys ready?
Well, somebody's full of themselves.
Yeah. What's up?
I'm just trying to figure out which light source came from where. Ready on your mark, sire.
All right. Take it away in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Weird Things Podcast. I'm Andy Main, joined by Brian Brushwood.
That is a fact, and that's all you're joined by. You, me, and Bryce. That's who the Weird Things Podcast has always been.
What more could we need, gentlemen?
Nothing.
I'm going to jump right into a question. A what if? And I have a couple what ifs for this podcast. The first what if is something that we visited, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago on these very microphones. One of them was literally these microphones, but on this podcast. Well, not this podcast, but this podcast show. Can I clarify myself any further than that?
Yeah, sure.
There are some pedantic people out there that listen, in particular myself. So, I want you to imagine, Brian, you wake up tomorrow and some killer flu type thing is raging across the world.
Oof.
All right, and this is a scenario we've seen repeated over and over again. It's even a TV show, but then the TV show didn't deliver on the premise of the TV show, to my disappointment.
Wait, which one?
I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay.
Getting
All
to
right.
that.
All right. All right.
And you're watching everybody one by one. The world starts to drop off like flies. Your family, every one of them, dead.
Oh,
Dead.
okay.
Right? This
All right.
super flu wipes off everybody. You're the last man. You're the last man, Brian.
Am I the last human or just the last man?
Last human, Brian.
Uh,
Enough with the fantasy there.
so the question is, like, let's say whether or not that's factually true, because I'm going to assume there's no internet. I can't really check anything. Maybe I could find a ham radio station and ask around if anyone's around, maybe set up a beacon saying, I think I'm the only man alive. And let's say some indeterminate amount of time goes past.
Say a week goes by.
Yeah.
All there is you've been holed up in your house in Austin, okay? And corpses everywhere. No human. What do you do? It's a week. It's a week. You just watch the news starts tomorrow. People getting sick. It's spreading. Monday night, you're like, oh man, there's a lot of people been sick. Congress is not going to go into session, and it keeps spreading and spreading and spreading. Family gets sick. Your children are all dead by Tuesday.
Yes.
Bonnie's dead by Wednesday.
Okay, yes.
Justin and I, dead. I'm holed up here. Like Brian, I'm going to hold up onto this. And then
Ah!
I'll call you later.
Yeah, I'll call you later. And I'm like, who's operating this cellular network? I thought everyone's
Still
dead.
some redundancies in place to keep the thing going. Those people, they're trying to keep that stuff
So
going. And then
we're
it's
coasting. Okay, so 7 days is long enough because, I mean, think about time is a funny thing. Think about times that you've gone on a 7-day camping retreat and people you meet on Monday, by the time you leave them the following Sunday, you feel like you've known them a lifetime. You've already forged alliances and broken them. You have best friendships. You have darkest enemies and whatever. 7 days is long enough that if I don't see a person during all that time and I feel like
you see people, they're just dead.
Right, correct. I don't see any living people. I feel like 7 days is enough for me to possibly have complete despair take over. Where and here's the big question, because this is gonna be a dumb parallel, a dumb sidejack. What do you? There's a game I played. Let's take the game Threes, right? Which is similar to the game Drop 7 on the iPhone. It's one of those games where you get random inputs and you keep doing the best you can to manage what you've got to keep building and building and building. But there is a moment at which point you can tell it is truly hopeless. You don't know if it's going to be 12, you're like, maybe it's 5 moves, maybe it's 10 moves away, but it's definitely over at this point. You take one gamble and you're like, if it's so-and-so, maybe I'm still in the game, but then you're like, no, I'm definitely not in the game. I'm not going to lie. On Drop 7 and on Threes, once I reach that point, just hit reset. I'm like, don't even see the point of doing that. Now, if I had a terminal illness, I could say, well, definitely 5 or 6 turns left. But during that time, I can make an impact on my children, on my children's children, and all that stuff. But you're proposing a scenario in which I have time to become convinced that all of humanity is truly lost, and it's just a matter of like, whether it's 5 turns, 100 turns, like I got to tell you, I would seriously consider just cashing out, just messing around until I found some high-end heroin, and then being all like, well, I hear this is pretty good, bleep, and then out I go.
Interesting. So your thought is you're going to check out.
Well, that's what I would be afraid of. Absent I am by nature an extremely optimistic person. But if the evidence is strong enough that there's no cause to be optimistic for literally anything, like there's no takeaway, actually, I take that back. Now that I think about it, knowing me, I would probably decide all of humanity is dead. There's plenty of food around. I appear to be immune. There's some predators I'll have to worry about. There's plenty of guns. But I can have a lasting impact on telling the story of the end of humanity. And I would probably grow a giant beard and start finding some stone tablets and carving out the story of the end of days. I would become that crazy hermit guy.
Moses?
Yeah, well, no, he was a prophet among the living.
Hey, this is the episode of Bible with Weird Things. So, I mean, here's what we would know. So we would know that you would start to think things through, and you'd be like, okay, so weeks gone by, you'd be like, okay, I know that there were ships out at sea that maybe didn't have it. I know that there might be some military installations in some other places that probably haven't been infected yet. So there are probably pockets of humanity somewhere. Dramatic break. um, as Andrew coughs. So what you know is you can assume there probably are some people somewhere. Now there might be only a matter of time before they end up getting infected, but there might be sort of a life cycle if they stay in. So you kind of have this idea like you may never see another human being for the rest of your life because there may only be like 30,000 people on the entire planet.
Yeah.
And so you could say that like, okay, you do have some incentive to the idea that somebody somewhere may hear my story. Somebody somewhere at some point may hear this, or maybe it'll be the aliens and they come down after they see, their handiwork.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, then I suppose there's a lot of stuff I'll assume I don't need to tell. All of recorded history is fairly well recorded. I of course would selfishly want to tell my story and things that I knew. The question is, what medium would I do it in? I would probably do it in a recorded medium that replays in some kind of, broad spectrum thing on the off chance somebody comes. Of course, it would be all embarrassing. What if somebody comes upon your broadcast and they listen to all 60 hours of your accounting and they give it a 1-star review and call it a bad prog rock album, basically?
Because there's only one other person to review it. It's
yes, exactly. And I'm like,
corrected.
as I'm dying, I'm like, the reviews are universally terrible.
Interesting. So, but that's your idea is to journal what took place and what happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, what else is there to do? I suppose now this is assuming I've given up. This is assuming I've taken as fact the fact that humanity is all of dead. I would like to think that with my skeptical nature, I would keep on fighting the good fight more than 7 days. But if we're playing the game of assuming that that's not the case, then I think we get an interesting, different result.
Well, I mean, I think that, like I said, I think the assumption would probably be that you would think that maybe somewhere there are some people, but your chances of encountering them are extremely limited, and, the safest thing may be to not move around.
Got it. So you're saying I have to weigh. So it's not a case where I know for a fact everyone's dead, but instead, I don't want to make it a cartoon, but let's assume it's closer to a zombie outbreak type thing, where it's like there's persistent danger everywhere, and encountering other people is probably not a safe thing. I mean, at that point, then it's a battle between me and them, between who can last the longest.
And you think about it, and it may be a battle between you and them. It could be.
Well, and when I say battle, I mean a battle for resources, a race for resources, where it's like I need to, like a real-time strategy game. I need to protect myself. I need to protect my resources. I need to make sure that should I encounter someone, I don't get close enough to get infected with whatever that is.
Instead of bug just walk across my keyboard here.
It's beginning! Run!
Justin and John Teasdale staying here. Next thing you know, this place is infested. That's what a Soylent bottle's for. It's going to get a burial in here. It's starting.
A burial at Soylent. Man, I can't think of a more indignant way for a bug to go than drowning in pure nutrition.
The irony. So let's talk about immediate things. So what are you going to do for survival? What are you going to do? Like, I live across the street from a supermarket.
Sure.
And like the first thing I'm doing is like, I'm thinking, okay, I'm finding the most secure place around here that I know and storing up, I'm taking.
So we've entered looting phase where there's enough evidence for me to think like crap's bad enough that it's time to just start grabbing first and asking questions later, right?
You go to the supermarket and everybody's dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, God, this is the dark thing. My first assumption will be that there's enough humanity around that yes, I should get enough food, basic foodstuffs, but I should also recognize that pound for pound, the most valuable trading goods will be intoxicants. So
Ah,
I'm gonna load like 80-20. I'm gonna get 20% rice and water, 80%, a bunch of vitamins, and then 80% Glenfiddich or whatever.
all right,
And
Brian. Let's do the math on this. Let's figure this out. Let's say, in your estimate, you could probably in 2 days driving around get a reasonable estimate of how many people are alive. You could say that there's not more than 1 in 10,000 people alive, right?
sure,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So that at that population level, your alcohol,
Will be
they're going to be,
relatively infinite, right?
yeah, you're gonna like, hey guys, look what I got. And they're like, yeah, Brian, look what we got.
I suspect, but again, this is the early days when I am not really clear on how many other humans there are. And keep in mind, that was the first move that Sawyer pulled on Lost. Was he was the smart one who went and stole all the all the booze, tiny 2-ounce bottles from the plane. It seems like that would be a power play. Once I had enough of those, I'm like, okay, I have them squirreled away in. First of all, I am now declaring myself warlord chieftain of my neighborhood. I'm assuming ownership of all these houses. I'm gonna tuck stuff in all of them in different places. So I got squirreled away.
March yourself right down to City Hall, prop yourself up in the judges, in a courtroom, and you declare yourself. I declare myself owner of everything.
I declare.
All opposed?
Yes, exactly. Okay, so you're saying it's probably not a good idea to think in and I'm assuming like you that I'll get to that point where I realize that resources aren't a problem and that I've wasted my first 4 days hoarding stuff in what will essentially be an abundance economy.
Well, I would say one is that some things like there's that you want to you're going to want to hoard things, things that will keep, but I'm charmed by the idea of there is a story to be told about somebody who figures out the legal means by which to inherit everything.
Wait! Oh my God! Somebody who goes through the county
goes
clerk
to City
records.
Hall. Like, how do you how does this? What's the chain of command and default in this situation?
He spends all this time living on jars of pickles and going through legal briefs, figuring out like, oh, I finally did it. That is the proof that I am the heir. And I am the king of England.
I filed a quit claim on everything.
Next up, yeah, and it's like, well, let's go for the Czech Republic. Let's see, how does that go through the law books? I gotta think the first thing you do, if everybody's dead in the neighborhood, first thing you do is you assess how much food you have. Second thing, again, you're afraid of other humans or other animals or whatever. You go round up everybody's guns.
What about the bodies, Brian?
I mean, you throw them outside, certainly.
Would you just throw them outside?
You got to drag them all the way down the street and then into the ravine. It's so far. I mean, it's like it'll stink for like, I don't know, 4 weeks, maybe.
Increase your chances of getting sick and also bring in buzzards,
I don't want
wild.
to touch any of that. Maybe I pour lye. Is that a thing? I saw that on TV. I go in and I find in people's detergents, I find lye and pour it on people, and then some people I experiment pouring Clorox. Other people
does somebody in your neighborhood have a pool?
Oh yeah, no, there's a few pools.
You drain the pool, pour the bodies in, and you burn them.
How do I drain a pool though? I'm just gonna throw it in the pool.
Gravity.
What?
You ever taken a hose and never drank a pool before?
Well, I don't know where I've drained a hot tub. Can I put them all in a hot tub?
Well, Brian, think about this. You have thousands of pounds of flesh attracting every kind of parasite and bacterium that you don't want around. Every scavenger, every buzzard, everything like that. Wild dogs. Again, understand that feral dogs are going to be one of the biggest things you're going to have to deal with because after a week or two of them starving, they're going to adapt to human flesh.
Okay. So, to be honest, I probably wouldn't think of the pool thing. I would probably drag them all downhill I would start a funeral pyre. But again, like, I would probably be too afraid to get close to their corpses. I guess, okay. Oh. I got the hazmat suits left over from the modern rogue shoot.
Right.
and I've got our homemade gas masks, and I put those on, and I walk around like a Kmart Walter White, dragging out all the bodies of all my neighbors. I would set fire to all of them, But even then, I'd be nervous about like how much gas. Oh, so this is another thing. Everybody acts like in the future you can siphon off gas from everything after the apocalypse, but that's not true. Like all of the gas from all of the cars will evaporate in like 2 or 3 months, right?
I don't. It depends. Like if you're talking ground tanks, whatever. It depends
No,
on the size of the tank.
no. I'm talking about from other cars. Let's see. E10. Yeah, that's ethanol gas, so that'll go away after 3 months or so. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think in cars you're gonna have a problem. Like it takes a while. You have to start, and so yeah, I think there's gonna be. It's not like you just leave it there for 3 years and then start it up.
Well, and also, how valuable is gas, right? Like, if what you're doing is using it not for energy to propel a vehicle, but instead for heat and for sterilization, it seems like you'd be better off fermenting just alcohol or getting pure alcohol or whatever.
Maybe. I mean, you're not gonna have to worry too much about sorts of fuel supplies and things like that. Because also what you will be able to do is at some point you'll be able to grab every solar panel in the neighborhood and around and just be able to use power. And
Yeah,
if
but
I'd be
how do I learn how to use said solar panels? Like, assuming. Well, first of all, I probably am not going to steal anyone else's solar panel. I'll probably just appropriate somebody else's house who has solar panels.
I mean, you might need a lot more though if you wanted to really be electric, but you're not
Yeah.
going to steal from who, Brian?
Well, I'm sorry. Well, I said appropriate, but I mean annex, because as the King of England, I can annex various territories here in these United States former territories.
Yeah. Yeah, you might want to go like for power, like diesel. I think diesel fuel lasts much longer. Can stay.
Yes, good point. And I guess are there diesel generators? I guess
Yes,
I'll have
right.
time to learn all this.
There are diesel generators.
Okay, right on. 6 months to a year without significant fuel degradation if you keep it clean, cool, and dry. That's not a long time.
No.
So I have to assume.
But I think that's about twice as long as the regular fuel. The regular fuel could be 6 months to a year if you had a preservative or something in it.
Okay.
This is without that.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, so, okay, so I have a short deadline before things get really dire. Is there any reason for me to suspect that I'll ever encounter another human being?
I don't know. Is there?
I would feel like I would keep constant vigilance the first 30 to 90 days, and then very quickly I'd just assume I'm the only guy. I think I would lose discipline pretty quickly.
What is undisciplined Brian like in this post-apocalyptic
It's
age?
an awful lot like current day Brian. It's not great.
Are you just like figuring out how to get power for your Vive?
Yeah. I'm like, one more time. Let me believe I'm in space. Take me away from all of this. I can't smell anything.
I have all the free room now.
Yes, exactly. I set up the Vive in the streets.
Here's and flash forward like 6 months later. I've got a beard still, only from here, scraggly, all right? Backpack, wiry thin, like 120 pounds, whipcord thin, hiking down an Austin street of a suburb, hair, just shaggy. I don't look anything like myself. Shaggy hair, right? This, just like maybe like
And yet still writing a novel on parchment as you travel forward.
Well, as I march through the Austin streets and I come across this house with a bunch of solar panels and this all around it, okay, and a big diesel truck there with the lawns overrun, and then I hear tonight on NSFW, Ryan, hey, that's me, and I
I'm
like
it's
doors
the
open.
#1 program in the world. The
I walk
only
up the
one worth
stairs,
watching.
and there you are, and there's like this horrible straw man version of Justin, with the camera on him, a stick figure Bryce. Right, the microphone's already plugged in. Like, shh, I'm broadcasting.
Yeah, I actually hit the mute button and I mouthed the words, "I'm live, damn it." We got our special guest, former president of the United States, Barack Obama. What's going on, B-Dog? Oh! Yeah, I could totally see that. Man, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I guess I would assume that. Oh, man, that's got to be tough to take on faith the idea that anybody will ever see anything you write and to bother to stay alive in what appear to be like the most dire of circumstances. I don't know.
I think like I'm gonna go like full Christo the artist in like I live in LA, you know. I'm gonna see what kind of performance art pieces and stuff I can do.
You just exist as the Salvador Dali of the universe at this point, where it's like anything that can happen should starting now.
I'm gonna take like a skyscraper and smash out enough windows to make my face. You know, I'm gonna go to the Coliseum and put every single combustible thing I can drag in there and set a fire there. I'm gonna leave my mark, and it won't be a pretty mark, ladies and gentlemen. It's gonna be a destructive but very, very visual sort of mark.
I believe it. So, was this story pulled from like an actual story? Did this happen to someone? They believe the world had ended.
No, Brian.
Okay, good. All right.
Brian, world's not ended. Don't worry.
I mean, if you know something, just blink twice and go to the Patreon plug. 3 times. Oh, thank goodness. Hey, man, if you enjoy weird things, if you love thinking about the end of the world, if you love stuff like Sasquatch but don't necessarily believe in them, then why don't you be one of the 428 patrons who support us over at patreon.com/weirdthings, WEIRDTHINGS. You guys are keeping us on the regular. You are our Metamucil.
Yes. It's
Otherwise,
if you want to be that.
Otherwise, we would be erratic and heterogeneous and very challenging to deal with.
So speaking of the end of the world, though, Brian.
Yeah.
Let me see here. We'll jump right into this. So, I mean, we've been having, there's been a lot of panic, a lot of conversations, a lot of talk, a lot of chatter about the whole Brexit, right?
Yeah, okay, so I got busted. I was in a conversation with someone recently, and they were all like, hey, how about that Brexit? And they, insert partisan side one or the other. And I've been comfortably out of the loop on this. And it's really weird to tune in to an issue after everybody is polarized on it. Because it's like you only see a funhouse mirror on both sides, and you have to kind of guess what the original intent was, because now all I see is tweets saying, hey, guess who's racist? As of now, Britain. And then you see tweets saying like, we really stuck it to the bureaucrats, didn't we? Hooray for freedom. And I'm just like, I don't know what any of this means. Do you have a way to sum it up?
Well, and I mean, I think listen, we're Americans, so to all of our British listeners, we apologize right off the bat for our ignorance on this topic and our subject and whatever we say, right? And might as well shut this podcast down because we're only going to make you upset, So let me make that very,
breaking
very clear.
news.
Any angry letters,
Americans self-obsessed.
Well,
Film at 11.
But guess what? Everybody is. Okay?
Yes, of course.
I mean, the only people are people whose borders are regularly invaded every 30 years.
Sure.
It's like, what do you call somebody who only speaks one language? I don't know. Somebody with really good border security.
somebody who managed to have their language become the lingua franca that everyone else learns. Hey, we're America.
What do you call somebody who's, when speaks the language? I don't know. Somebody's never been invaded. That's what I call them.
Wow, dude, we're really taking a victory lap on this one.
So, hey, I already said warn it. So, it's obviously I have been following it prior to that, and I will, my sort of source of where I've been following it are, people who are pro Brexit because of from their position as far as how they want to participate in a representative democracy, and their viewpoint is that as the EU, so much of the authority gets put to Brussels and from bureaucrats who are unelected, and that's frustrating for them, and that's why they have a problem with it because of the way that. If you're a member country, you can't say yes or no to certain regulations, things that are passed through there and whatnot. So it's a complicated issue. And I think that part of what's been frustrating for people who like were not for leave, for the Remain campaign, for people from over here watching this, is for some people, they look at, it gets into like, where do you want the future to be? Where do you want the world to go? Where do you see the future is this? And do we see the future as this one world government, where we travel freely and all that? And some people see that this is because of this vote from the UK to leave the EU, they see that this is a step backwards from that view, a step backwards from that goal. Where other people would say that, yes, that's a great view, but this is not the path to it, where you give up your local, your democracy, and you give up your right to vote on certain things on a local level. When you push those off to bureaucrats and to panels and things like that, you have no control over, then you lose an aspect of freedom. And so that's my way of sort of summing up. And again, everybody's going to have their own interpretation of it. And I will tell you this, is that I would say that if you're reading one side telling you what the other side thinks, you're not getting an accurate view of that other side's point of view.
Well, and this is probably a good point for me to bring up one of my favorite concepts that I've learned in the last decade, the idea of the ideological Turing test. And I think I mentioned it before on Weird Things, because this is the kind of issue where you can often get a polarized view, or certainly I have, as I'll be first to admit I haven't really tried to understand. I've only passively been watching the Funhouse Mirror version of everything. But as you know, the Turing test is a test in which a artificial intelligence attempts to pass as human, and if you can't tell if it's an AI or a human, then it's, for all effective effects purposes, it's a artificially intelligent being. Likewise, an ideological Turing test is, imagine if you're somebody who supports Brexit, imagine going into a room with a bunch of people who oppose it and being so good at using their own rhetoric and expressing their own ideas in a way that's palatable to them, that they don't realize that you're not one of them. In that case, you've passed the ideological Turing test, and of course the inverse as well. Everything's getting very cartoonized, and I don't see a lot of people that can pass an ideological Turing test right now.
Well, yeah, and I think that, and there's a lot of, there are a number of people for the Brexit who were frustrated by the very liberal immigration policy, and you could draw parallels to say that, they were acting racist or whatever too. And then that becomes one thing for somebody to single on. If you're an anti-Brexit, anti-leave, then you could say, well, it's because these people are racist and racism's evil, so that's a bad point of view. And I would say that it would be wrong to say there wasn't that element to it, but to say that that was the entirety of it, which a lot of commentary has said,
sure,
is not very disingenuine. And the stuff that I've been exposed to, and primarily reading Matt Ridley, Matt Ridley, who was one of my famous science writers, is now a member of the House of Lords, and his commentary on that, which has been, very interesting to me about that. And it comes down to, from their point of view, is if you're a person that likes the idea of kind of, I look at like, I don't think direct democracy is ever going to be a great idea, but I think it's a great ideal. I think that is a thing to move towards. The more control that we as individuals have on shaping our future is better. The less that we assign to other parties, and the more we give up, I think the less free that we really are. And so I look at any time that you're able to get more democratic control over your outcome or whatever like that, is better. Sometimes the outcomes aren't good. We're in a very scary election right now, but that's the thing with democracy, is that sometimes it's going to be very, very gross and very, very frightening and very, very horrific, but I prefer that to the alternative.
In the spirit of Weird Things, let's move to some of the nutty hypotheticals, because when I was talking to this person, they were explaining why Brexit was a good thing. And then I asked, rhetorically, I was like, wait, so if it's good for, and again, this is not a referendum. I don't care. I don't give a rat's ass what Britain does. This is not about that. But the question I asked was, wait, so if it was good for Britain to leave the EU, would it be good for Texas to leave the United States? And of course, Texas is one of those, that's our perennial hobby every 10 years, is there's some movement to talk about, going back to a republic or whatever. And this person was like, I don't know, maybe. So can we couch this in what it would look like as Texas seceding, specifically assuming that Texas could actually vote to go independent? the question I asked, because this person was saying, well, bureaucrats can't run things and it'll make trade easier. And I was like, wait a minute, if Texas left the United States, are you telling me that there would be fewer tariffs? like it seems to me like the moment Texas is an independent country, the Texas Longhorn Cattle Association sends a lobbyist to Austin, because now they have lobbyists because we would be an independent country, and they make the case for, well, we just want to compete on a level playing field with all those Nebraska heifers.
I would, and it's hard because it's not a thing where everything pairs up exactly. But if you were to say that if Texas was like a territory and you were not able to elect people to Congress, in certain,
okay.
And you could have laws passed over you that you didn't have the ability.
Now we're making it too real. Now we're getting to the actual lack of representation thing.
Which is what a core argument for the people who wanted to leave.
Correct. Also, full disclosure, America wanted to leave for a lack of representation, among other things.
Yes, and that was cited by many of the people for leave, was they said that, we should follow that ideal, and that was a worthwhile reason. So anyhow, I want to move past that. I'm going to move past that because the whole world is very polarized about this sort of issue and is convinced the other side is absolutely stupid, racist, ignorant, or whatever. Let's forget that for the moment. Let's assume that everybody has, to themselves, equally valid reasons for why they're pro or con. Let's assume that. Let's pretend for a moment there are people on both sides of the issue who are very intelligent. Let's pretend for that for a moment, okay?
All right, I believe it. I'm going to go beyond pretending, right into full-on buying it.
Yeah, I'm gonna accept that we could put two reasonably intelligent people in a room. They can come out with cogent arguments for either side of it. Okay, which to listen to some sides, they won't acknowledge that.
I'm telling you, it's that funhouse mirror. Both of you guys, knock it off. Come up with. Sorry. Never mind.
Let's move past that. Because this is an entry point into what do we want the world governments, or whatever to be like 100 years from now. What shape do we want like that to be?
Okay, so let's project, let's say 200 years into the future. Here's the weird part. I don't know why I feel this way, and I'd be interested to know, and write in if you have an opinion on this. But for some reason, I like the idea of there always being an opposition party to everything. As crazy as some of the stuff he says is, my favorite thing Jesse Ventura ever said when I saw him at a speech was what's so great about a two-party system? That's only one more party than Russia had. And I thought that was pretty great. And so I love the idea of there being, if not multiple governmental entities, at least different political entities. And for some reason, I want to believe that 200 or 300 years into the future, I want to believe that there's a moon contingency, that there's an Earth contingency, that there's a greater Earth satellite contingency, and an outer asteroid belt contingency, all of which that have different motivations, and that they negotiate and work to from differing viewpoints to come to a compromises that benefit humanity.
So what does that mean?
I guess what that means is, for some reason, the idea of like the thesis as you proposed it was, what do we want a one government world to look like? Is my
do we want a one government world? I'm saying what 100 years from now, what do you think it should be?
I think all of our debates should be settled with ping pong tournaments. And right. I think that.
No, but seriously, give me a serious answer.
No. I mean, I say that half jokingly, but like we're already seeing that right now. Nowadays, many ideas are being settled not with body counts, with physical murders, but instead they're proxy wars of spending money. And people, as money represents the sum product of work and effort and energy, people are dedicating them to different ideas, whether it's to buy propaganda for their side or to buy sabotage for the other side or whatever. We're already seeing that in the increasing robotization of warfare, where it's like, what if war in the future was nothing about but whose robots could kill more of the other guy's robots and waste more of the other guy's money. We're even seeing that nowadays in the movement towards cyber warfare, where a viable very terrifying strike would be, what if the economy got shut down
Right.
for 4 days or whatever? Like,
But
I
it
want
still
to
has
continue in that direction.
it still has to be tied to the real capability to do damage, though. It has to be tied into a real way to damage productivity or something, though. And that in the scenarios where people go to where they jump like, and that's why we could settle it with something else. Like, no, it's still got to be like the Cold War in many ways. We started using computers in the 1950s to sort of try to predict the outcomes of war. Like the defense industry was one of the biggest funders of computational technology because they were trying to figure out, first, how to make bombs land better, to how to produce fissionable uranium, to then, hey, how do we win this Vietnam War if we program in certain data and get the outcome we want? And then sometimes it says no, you can't. And well, we'll throw that out. We've been doing that, to your point, we've been doing that for years using computers to compute, Russian, land army sizes versus ours to figure these things out. Like, yeah, no, not a good idea to go to war. And I think that, we had, there was 50 years of peace in Europe, outside of, the Balkans, prior to, UK joining, the EU. And I think we'll probably have the same thing. And we've had, for Europe and America and whatnot, for modern capitalist nations, we've had peace. We've had this continuous peace since World War II, and I think that's likely to continue.
Sure.
Mike, what's that?
I said, sure.
Yeah, and there are instances of civil war being a separate sort of issue. But, I think that, for the most part, that's going to continue. I think that we all love the idea at some point of being able to travel freely, right?
Oh, sure, certainly. Both, intra-country, intra-continent, intra-globe, and extra-globally.
Mm-hmm. Now, the problem gets into is that the problem of traveling freely happens when you live in a place and you're afraid that you're going to get too many people traveling to your place, and driving up prices or whatever. And that's where the fear, not my backyard sort of mentality comes in there. It's a great idea to go freely, but when all of a sudden, you can't buy a house because everybody wants to live where you live, then that's when people get upset.
But isn't that however inefficient, a self-correcting problem in that, for example, Austin is going through that now. There's people moving to Austin. They're like, whoa, bro, I moved to Austin and I can't afford to live in this city. And like that, as frustrating as that is, that reduces the appeal to moving to Austin because there's so many people moving in and they can't afford to live there.
Well, but it depends then. If you have higher income people, like you take a place like San Francisco, and if you live there and you're a middle income family, the problem you have is that you find yourself increasingly being priced out of there. And that's a problem in California in general. There are people who are being priced out of here because people with higher incomes coming in, or lower income people who are more comfortable with higher density in a house.
Yeah.
People who are more comfortable putting 6 people in a house where normally 2 people would want to live.
Well, and plus also think about this. If we're talking about like in far future, we are entering a phase where, thanks to virtual reality, 6 people might be able to live more comfortably in their own, individual cell inside a house because they have outside right there in their room, and they throw on their virtual reality and get the majority of their running around, going anywhere experience very cheaply.
Yeah, I think we're a ways away from that, though.
Well, hold on. I mean, how far off? Because we were talking 100, 200 years out. You don't.
No,
think...
I agree. I guess what I'm saying is like, and yes, your point. I did say like 100 years from now, what do you want the shape of things to be like? And I guess that, using contemporary Austin as an example, that's we're still not at the point we're okay with that kind of density. But I agree. At some point, I think if we have faster forms of travel, and you're able to take small spaces and make them much more spacious. I absolutely agree.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about let's not go 100 years out. As soon as, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years out, let's assume that all of a sudden self-driving cars and Uber is fairly ubiquitous and cheap. Movement from place to place is close to free or approaching free or whatever. All of a sudden, you don't need a car, you don't need a garage, you don't need parking spaces or whatever. All of a sudden, a 5-bedroom house becomes essentially a 5 apartment co-op where all of a sudden, five strangers or couples could live perfectly comfortable, sharing, the kitchenette or whatever, and going everywhere to and from work, or all of a sudden freely.
Well,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
let's say, yeah, I think sure. But are we going to see, as people moved from the farms to the cities, then we came up with the idea of the suburb. And the idea was the car made it possible to work in the city, but not have to live there. The car made it possible because the problem when you were trying to radiate outwards from cities just using traditional commuter rails, whatever, it got exponentially more expensive the larger the area you tried to cover.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons when people get frustrated by, the transport, like public transportation, is they don't understand it's exponentially more expensive the further out you try to radiate. If you're moving along a corridor, it's you can figure that out. It's a very simple cost, but when you radiate, for the audio listeners, I'm making a circle that gets wider and wider and wider. The amount of line that you need to have, it gets more and more expensive. But if you can have like faster routes of transportation, faster driving cars, things like that, then we have like the suburb, and I'm sure the extraburb. I'm sure there's already some urban planning word or phrase for this, but the idea of like, oh, okay, I live in Burbank. If I go 30 miles, northeast, there's nothing. There's a lot more empty space there. So if we have a high speed corridor that connects here to there, then you could start building even more suburbs in there, or 50 miles.
Yeah, so I would say in a perfect vision, and there's a million reasons why this could be wrong, but let's say all cars are electric vehicles that are efficiently powered by, let's say solar or wind with efficient batteries or whatever. So essentially the energy cost is virtually nil. Let's say they're all self-driving so that you don't have any labor cost to get into town. And let's say that due to mesh network, clever swarm technology, they're able to go 90 miles an hour, 4 feet apart in the highway. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, you literally could live anywhere, and your longest commute is maybe 40 minutes, the current average commute, basically. Mm-hmm. Only along that time, you can sleep, you can be productive, you can do your hygiene stuff, and you don't even have to worry about parking when you get there. Do you think that so here's the question, is given that technology, do you think that we continue our consolidation into giant hive cities, which seems to be the tendency of humans to want to live next to each other? Or do you think we see a diaspora where everybody all of a sudden moves so far out and they all find their own 5 acres with their own sunset where they don't see another house as far as the eye can see?
The answer is both. Not everybody wants the same thing.
Yeah.
I like going to New York. I don't like living, on the 30th floor and stacked in there like that. I like the suburb where I can go outside and I can walk around at night.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. I think different things for different people. But I do think that, and we've touched about this in the chat room, is I think one of the biggest liberating things is going to be is like, listen, it would be great if we could like hyperloop up stuff like, places, but that's really far off for a number of reasons, and many reasons. And I think that more shorter term is going to be taking the HOV lanes. We've talked about this before, and making those into high speed electronic transit lanes where you do take your Uber robot car that goes 100 miles an hour, and making it like, oh, let's just open up that lane. And let's say companies that want to provide mass transit that are robot transit that can go ridiculously fast, we're all okay with it.
I just had an astonishing thought, because you were mentioning how some people like to live in the country, some people like to live in the city. And it occurred to me, like the instinctual thought was like, well, what about people who like both? And I realized in this super efficient economy, you would probably, or many people would be able to afford both. But then it occurred to me, what if people only wanted to stay in the city 1 out of 7 days? Well, it wouldn't make sense to rent an apartment and have it sit unused all this time. And then I imagine, and I'm sure this has been thought up by some science fiction author before me, but what if there was essentially an Uber of apartments where imagine a skyscraper with 100 units, all identical except for the second room pod or the closet pod. And so what you did was you dialed up that you wanted to visit your apartment robotically. It Tetrised up your closet pod in there. All the rooms were identical, so it always felt like you were coming home to the same room. The paintings were programmed to switch over to all your favorite posters. So you dial it up like an Uber. You get there, it's always on a different floor, always in a different wing or whatever. But the moment you walk in, the lights look like home, the music playing looks like home, all the posters and decorations and art look like home. You open up the closet, all your stuff is there right where you left it, as if it is. Oh, man, that would be astonishingly efficient and would make everyone feel like they had a second apartment.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's sort of a timeshare, and you could certainly figure out, there are a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different solutions. Your problem is going to have to do with the peak or when do people need to be there kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, there's, you're seeing a lot of really amazing disruptive things. Airbnb, which is causing cities to change laws to prevent it or whatever because it's affecting property prices. A lot of fascinating things. Your idea of the closet light, it could be a service where you could have a service could store your closet in a pod and push it into wherever you're going to stay when you're back to go visit there. I don't know what percentage of people, what the market would be for like that, but I certainly think that will be an answer for some people.
Well, especially when what you don't want is a permanent residence, because if that's important to you to live in the city and stay in the city, you'd of course pay for an actual place. But if you wanted to feel, well, and I guess, and again, we are just describing a timeshare, but we're talking about a fidelity of experience that was heretofore, impossible to achieve for the kind of costs that you'd be able to do it in the future.
Mm-hmm. An idea I've been playing with is the subject of the closet is if you ask me if I wanted to roboticize one thing, it would be to turn my closet into basically a TARDIS for all my stuff and have basically robot arms and manipulators that I could take clothes, everything, just throw it into a little, compartment there and have it figure out how to pack everything super dense inside of there. Everything needs to be pressed and folded.
And there's no reason, so imagine your experience in that case would be you wake up from your apartment, you leave your clothes everywhere, you have your coffee, you just leave the apartment like you normally would, and you would leave, and in your mind, it would be as though some maids came, folded up everything, put it back away, put everything back where it belonged, and then you came home, and granted, you came home to another address, but you came home to essentially to what looks like the exact same apartment, only with everything put away.
I was just thinking for stationary, not this rambling man lifestyle, but the idea of think about all the stuff you have in your house, all the stuff you don't use or all the crap that IKEA comes up with ways to store.
Sure.
Just the idea of how do you maximize space, and imagine the idea if you took we have computer algorithms to figure out how to stack things together. What's the most efficient way to stack stuff? And we accumulate garbage and stuff like that. Like I was thinking just for my books behind me, I would love, just have one unit that sticks out maybe 2.5 feet, 3 feet from my wall here. I could put everything into it, could have a video display on the front, could show me, it could look like in one display could look like it's just a library. Yeah. Or I could have one in my bedroom that I just throw all my clothes in there, and then I can stand in front of it and say, oh, what outfits do I have? But it could efficiently pack and press and fit all the stuff in there, because then you could compress everything into a very small space. And then if you got really, really clever, some things that could be 3D replicated, it says, oh, yeah, we're just going to break this thing down. We'll print it for you again when you need it.
Dude, that is the most amazing part. The idea that something can be replicated, both in your data and other stuff. Because think about hoarders. The reason people hoard is because they have a hard time letting go of the past. And they feel like, well, if I give, this is my favorite alarm clock. It was given to me by my mom when I was in fifth grade or whatever. If I let this go, then I'm letting go of that memory or whatever. But let's. My wife was the one who just started saying look, just take a picture of it and then throw it away. You'll always have that picture, and you can look and remember that memory. Will be just as precious as ever. But it's going a step farther, where it's just preserve in memory for reconjuring later, and you'll probably never ever ask it to be 3D printed or whatever. But down the road, if there's ever a moment where you're like, hey, bring back everything I remember or I had from fifth grade, and it all of a sudden it gets all reprinted, and you have that novel experience of coming home after whatever. I don't know. That's all of this stuff could be automated and brought right now almost to a fidelity good enough for you to experience the nostalgia hit, certainly in 100 years, it'll be 100% there.
For sure. I thought, I would have thought 20 years ago that I would probably have all of my books to be digital and I wouldn't be holding on to books. But I found out that I still like printed books. I still like to hold on to them. I still like to read them.
Okay, so I'm actually having an ethical dilemma because I love my printed books and I love looking at other people's libraries because it's like looking into their minds. I love looking at my own library, but I also deeply enjoy chatting with someone and having them, maybe they'll say they have a dilemma. And I was like, oh, there's this great book you should read. And I love that experience of saying, hold on one second, walking over to the library, grabbing the book and just giving it to them. There's nothing like giving someone a book. And on one level, I'm pained because I won't have it now. But on the other level, I deeply love the idea of like, here's something that I held in my hands that was precious to me, that had a profound experience on my mind. And now I'm giving it to you and it will hopefully have the same experience.
I would love for, I don't know, the idea of if we could make a digital book that like could feel like a real one, the pages could, we've had certain forms of like paper and stuff like that. Like I would feel much easier about the idea of, if my Kindle could actually be what looked like, let me grab
Audio listeners, there we go.
Yeah, if I could grab a book and then it could have, actually have the pages change or whatever book it wanted to be.
I feel like we're not that far from, if not that, something close enough to it that it becomes sort of, this virtual ownership. So picture instead of a Kindle, you have a 200-page pure e-ink volume that you're able to shake, and it goes from being a copy of Public Enemy Zero to Angel Killer to to whatever, and then and you could go through the pages and find the passages, and then you could give, or for a nominal charge, let's say you're like, oh no, I love this book, this passage means a lot, here, pull out your virtual book or whatever. Go ahead.
It could function like Kindle does today, where you can, in that sense, but just give us a different format where it actually feels like a real book.
Yeah, it'd be great too. Does Kindle have automatic? You can lend titles on Kindle, correct?
Yes, if the publishers can allow you to lend titles.
Can you set a default retrieval time? Because that's the one thing that makes people anxious about lending, is because so often we lend stuff and we never get it back. It'd be great if you could lend a book and say like, hey, I'll give you a 30-day lending on it, and then like after 30 days, it just automatically quietly reverts back to you.
Yeah, I don't know.
Kindle says you can lend a Kindle book to another reader for up to 14 days.
So it does it automatically?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. Well, boy, it's a testament to how insightful yet unused that feature is. Mm-hmm. that the three of us could not know that automatically.
And I enable my books for lending, and you would think, I don't know. I'm like, sure, all right, I like the idea.
I would like to see the same thing. I'd like to see Amazon do the same thing with Audible, because being somebody who lives in the Audible ecosystem, right now I just have to, I don't know. I wish I could marry my wife's Audible library even, but I can't. We have to be separate apartments.
Can I tell you that the problem I've been having with Audible lately though?
What's that?
Often enough, I get my credit and I go look to see how I want to spend my credit. And my credit, I'm paying like $15 a month. I find out that on Amazon, I can buy the ebook for like $10 and get the audiobook for like $5 extra.
Oh, so you keep buying the audiobook extra
well,
rather
I'm like,
than using
why am
your
I
credit?
subscribing to Audible if it's actually cheaper to get the ebook and the audiobook?
I mean, I know for me, because I will never read the ebook. I will.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's still. I'm not saving. Even then, I'm still spending more. I'm not getting anything extra to the subscriptions.
Oh, I see. You're saying $9.99 for the book plus
$4.99 to get the ebook.
Yeah.
Get the Audible version. So I've had a number of times like, oh, I'm gonna buy. And I go look at Amazon, like, no, I can just buy this for $10 and get the Audible version for $5. And like, why am I paying $15 a month? And sometimes some of the things I look like the price is like cheaper if I just bought it outright.
I think some of I might be making this up, but like I read so many audiobooks that I get ahead of schedule, and I sometimes have to buy, this is even on the Platinum 2 a month program.
Mhm.
I run out for the year, and then I'll buy 20 credits for, I want to say like $100 or something like that. So it's only
$5 each?
yeah. I mean, it depends on certain sales or whatever.
Hmm.
But I know this much. I know that that since I started doing audiobooks, I moved from reading 2 or 3 nonfiction books a year to reading 20 to 30 nonfiction books a year. I guess even, yeah, no, I guess 20 to maybe 40. I don't know. But yeah. Speaking of which, it's a good segue. You want to go into picks?
Let's go into picks.
Do you have one?
I have, yes, I do have a pick.
Okay, I do too.
And it's Andrew shows up to the party a year too late.
Oh,
and,
this is my favorite. This is my favorite bit.
And it's what it's like people are like, oh, you're gonna love this. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I'll love it. I know. Let me get around to it. And then I'm kind of
Is it
laid up
Rick
in
and
bed
Morty
feeling
again?
ill. And 6 hours later, I'm 6 episodes through. Enjoying the hell out of it. And then I'm like, I got to get to sleep because I got to get up tomorrow on podcast and I got to finish this book and turn it into my editor. Mr. Robot.
Oh my God, it's so good, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Robot is amazing. I'm going to say something and you're going to think I'm saying it's a spoiler, but this is truly the moment I watched the first episode, stylistically, concept-wise, thematically, the moment I saw Mr. Robot episode 1 pilot, I said, holy crap, this is Fight Club, the TV show. This is amazing.
Yeah, I would say that it's very much, and then you start looking for those sort of elements or things to that. Hold on a second.
Yeah, that's okay. But they definitely make little winks and nods indicating.
But then they go and say, well, no, because if this is the logic we're following, then you're not going to see this thing happen. But it's also, it's like, it is an amalgamation of this is created and written by Sam Esmail, who also directed a number of the episodes. Fantastically shot, extremely well directed. I thought the writing's amazing. And it's like, you're like, hey, you like Fight Club? Great. You like American Psycho? We've got him in there too. We've got, we got Bateman's here. We've got all these characters you love from all these sort of other things. They're all here, which is, I like it, but it is this sort of thing. You're like, oh, House of Cards, we've got this thing you thought was really cool here too.
Sure. Well, and I don't know if you heard, but Sam Esmail is confirmed to be directing all the episodes of season 2 of Mr. Robot, which, by the way, comes out in just over 2 weeks.
Yeah, he did a number of the ones for season 1, and
Correct.
so he did a great job. It's one of these things like, I love Fight Club. Now, Fight Club for me, the politics, like, oh, let's destroy all the banks. It's like, you mean like your mom's pension plan? The thing that's going to keep her out of, poverty, when she gets older and can't work for her, support herself like that.
That's the double-edged sword is like, yes, we could destroy the things that hold the debt, but also the people who bought that debt might be your neighbor and you.
Yeah, the largest holders of that debt are
Sure, but forget all that.
Forget all that. Just wave your hands over that. Forget that evil, And so once just get over that, and you just enjoy it. Just enjoy it, And so, absolutely loved. Thought it was extremely well done, well presented. The idea of the unreliable narrator can either be very problematic or very interesting, but when the unreliable narrator pretty much tells you, "Hey, I'm an unreliable narrator," great.
Yeah. It does. It's very upfront with all that stuff, and the guy who plays the main character is just great. He's got Rami Malek has that haunting look.
Yeah.
He's amazing. And Christian Slater is just the right amount of coy. It's great. It's great. I can't say enough good stuff about it.
Yeah, big fan.
Geez.
Oh, it's on Amazon Prime right now. So if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free.
Well, I'm going to give a spoiler alert on my pick for After Things. It's going to be Ego is the Enemy, and I'll talk about why in After Things. But since you were talking about being late to the party, I'll play the same game and say my pick is something I was late to the party on until last night. It's a series that is masterfully executed, note for note perfection, creative, outrageous, and awesome. I thought it was going to be too heavy to get into. I thought it was going to be heavy-handed and eye-rolling and, too smart for its own good. But it turns out it's just flat out hilarious from beginning to end, and that's IFC's documentary now.
Oh, yeah.
Bryce already had it called up. He nailed it. He guessed it. So good. I was unprepared. I watched the first 3 episodes last night. The one where they're riffing on Vice is amazing. Drones. Jack Black showing up as the editor-in-chief was awesome. The Canuck of the North. So good. I am utterly delighted to keep going through the rest of it. And I assume, is there a second season, Bryce, or is this the only one?
They've been greenlit for second season.
Oh, yeah. So good.
That was a show I was so prepared not to like because it had every element that I could be like, man, it's not just a hipster BS kind of thing. And then I realized
it's totally what I thought.
Clearly described me. It just the Sandy Passage.
Oh my God, the Sandy Passage when it suddenly turns into spoiler alert, when it turns into like Blair Witch at the end, it was freaking amazing. By the way, I think I was worried that it was going to be another Portlandia, and I think there are things I like about Portlandia, but I think in general it's a little bit too high-minded for its own good. Its pacing is a little bit slow, whereas Documentary Now, because they're riffing on specific documentaries, and they say which one in the notes. They're like, this is our take on blank. This is our take on blank. Set in the exact same time period. It is note perfect in its execution. So good, so funny.
Yeah. Glad to hear you like it. So, gentlemen, it's been weird.
Damn right.
Oop. Good show.
So Grey Gardens didn't have the funhouse horror ending, did it?
No, did not have that.
Okay, because that was my favorite part. Like, I found myself actually gasping, going, when there were snakes and entrails and all that. I'm like, like, it was good horror at the end of it.
Oh, God. And it was just because you're like, once you get like, all right, you guys have really faithfully recreated these kooks. You've really... Wait, there's a thread here.
Yeah.
And now you're going to pull on that thread and, I'll be right back.
Tensor Guy says, maybe we don't know. We know pretty well that it didn't end exactly like that.
Oh man. Oh, that's great. Hey, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, check in on the kids.
Okay.
That was a fun show, Andrew.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're within earshot, but I thought that was really good. Check out my pits.
Ooh, nice.
Somebody worked out.
Go check on those kids.
Roger that. I'll be right back.
I just got a new game on the Wii U, which I know. Usually not a phrase said lately. It's Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE, which is like the dumb, like it's the worst title for a video game. But it's basically those Persona games, but crossed over with the Fire Emblem Tactics sort of games. And it's pretty good. It's kind of stupid. It's actually kind of a little stupid in just like a lot of ways. But as far as like it goes for a JRPG, it's pretty good. You don't see turn-based stuff like that very much. I think I'm gonna finish it. I feel like I will actually get it finished before Persona 5 comes out. Because it's ended up being pretty shallow. Tensor asked how the catfish cakes were. They were okay. They were alright. I used way too much onion, and I definitely did not chop them finely enough. But I have enough stuff where like I might make more of them, but with either little or no onions. Because I still have a bunch of ingredients left. So, because otherwise they were pretty good, but they missed the mark on.
What did I stumble into here, Bryce?
So last night I made catfish cakes. They're like crab cakes, but you use catfish. You see. because crab is expensive. And so I periscoped it. I don't know, last night at like 1 a.m., 12:30, 1 a.m.
Right.
And I was just generally unprepared to make biscuits. Like, I don't have a food processor, so the onions that I had to chop very finely were not chopped very finely at all, so there's huge bits of onions in it. They ended up coming, like, besides, like, kind of just having a bad proportion of, like, onion to everything else, like, they're pretty good. So I might try to make them again, but with a lot less onion.
So you're like live streaming as you make stuff?
I don't normally, but I did Periscope it because it was kind of a wacky thing that I hadn't made before, and it wasn't just, I'm gonna cook up some meat and a can of vegetables or something. It ended up being taking like an hour and a half or so. Yeah. But now I know how to make fish cakes.
Yes.
So,
I'm not a fish eater.
Not a big fish fan?
No, grew up around it, just never developed a taste for it.
I wouldn't say I super love fish, but definitely I like it. Open Bio says you don't have the chopped. I don't have a food processor or a blender, if that's what you mean. Yeah. Also, tilapia is really cheap, so
yeah,
I'll eat that. But then there's a point where it's like, man, tilapia, of the cheap meats, tilapia probably has the taste that you can get sick of the quickest.
It sounds like the name of an exotic model. She's like Dutch North African tilapia.
Yeah,
She's
tilapia.
like beautiful, like just these amazing,
Gills.
almost Ethiopian sort of features, caramel, whatever. But like this, just this. That I do with tilapia. Oh my God, she graces the runway. She's incredible.
Who's this? Tilapia, our fake.
Yeah,
Model.
it just always sounds to me like a Dutch North African model.
Oh, dude, tilapia is the best.
Yeah, tilapia, she's graceful. Just graceful. Long legs. They seem almost impossibly long, but look wonderful. The elegance in which she carries herself. And what she's been doing for the rights of third world children is incredible. Her charity is just fantastic. I'm a big fan of tilapia.
Man, you get me hungry.
So for After Things, we have Bryce sent over something, and then I have a project I'd love to brainstorm out there if it's possible.
Cool. Ooh, yeah.
All right.
Let me hit this. Boom. Let me hit this. All right. You ready to go?
Roger, Roger.
All right. Take it away in 3, 2.
Welcome to the After Things podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Brian Brushwood.
Oh, yes, y'all.
And chiming in is the ever-present Bryce.
Hi.
He's with you at all times.
Yeah, Bryce is wearing his Wiener Unicorn Pegasus shirt there.
It says believe.
Yeah. Wiener dog.
Gentlemen, let's jump right in
Pegasus.
there. For those of you who don't know, on the After Things show is we talk a lot about being a creative, pursuing your creative ambitions, building small businesses, etc. And we weigh in with our experiences. I'll use the word experience instead of expertise, because that would imply that we know what the hell
We
we're
knew
talking
what we're
about.
doing, yeah.
Not at all. And this comes in from the first topic here. If you have one, by the way, you can send it to neshcom@gmail.com. neshcom@gmail.com and put subject line After Things. And please put After Things in the subject so poor Bryce knows what he gets way more email than any human should.
Yes, please.
So James writes us, "Hey boys, sorry men."
No, I think he meant,
Harrison
hey,
here.
boys. Sorry, men.
Yeah.
Unless he means like he pities us.
Yeah.
Hey, boys. Sorry, men.
Sorry, man.
It took me a while to write this email, but my question is this. That should be a semicolon there. What do you guys do to combat procrastination? Some days I just don't want to go do the boring parts of show business, invoices, bookings, phone calls, etc., as I'd rather just go perform. Any tips on how to fight this? Do these tips translate to other things like writing, doing a podcast, starting a YouTube channel? Yeah, I've never had a problem with procrastination ever.
Oh,
Ever.
jeez. Well, and it's especially tough. So let's talk about I think you and I are fairly qualified to speak on the unique fusion that being a self-employed entertainer represents. In that, when you begin, you do not have the fantasy of everyone is that they all want to believe that, like, well, I just make the art and then somebody else does all the business stuff and they'll
Yeah.
work real hard and get me booked and I don't have to worry about that. It's a fantasy. It'll never happen.
Yeah.
Everybody would do well to let go of that now and forever, starting right this minute.
Yeah. Listen, procrastination is probably the two enemies you have to deal with. Is one is procrastination, the other one is a lack of introspection and not having an ability to get better. And yeah, and it's funny, like, yeah, that if somebody else does this, all the time on Twitter, I just got this, like, somebody's like, hey, I got a lot of great ideas for books. Well, that's wonderful. You know?
Yeah.
That's great. You
Look,
know,
oh no, I
ideas
just
are the
thought I
cheapest.
would be the idea guy. I'd give you the concept and then you could run with it and maybe we could both put our names on the book.
Let me iterate to this audience. When I was a kid, I used to tell my dad, "What's this idea?" Where my dad, like, ideas aren't worth anything, and I'd be like, "Nah, it's a great idea." And then as I get older, and the more ideas I have, the more I realize, oh yeah, no, ideas really aren't worth. Some ideas are better than others, but it doesn't mean that they have value outside of that class of
Well,
ideas.
let's be fair and say not that ideas are worthless, but that ideas truly are a dime a dozen. Like they are so bountiful. You can find them littered. You can
Yeah,
find
you
the
can-
sidewalks littered with them.
You can rate one idea over another. They have a value inherent to other ideas, but the value of them outside of, having any sort of effort put into them is next to zero. So, but yes, there some inflated African currency is worth more than some other inflated African currencies. And there have been cases too of, your Confederate dollars too. Let's not pick.
Sure.
So what it comes down to is procrastination, and I deal with this all the time. I watched 6 episodes of Mr. Robot. Granted, I was sick, and I should have been working on my 3rd Jessica Blackwood book, and I may have, to answer to my editor for this. But man, laying in bed and not moving just seemed much more appealing than moving and doing something. And I will tell you, the simplest answer to procrastination is this, and you're going to go, oh, it's so simplistic. And I said, that's the reason that it works. And this came from reading, I think, one of the greatest motivational speakers and people that you, if you read deeply into them and you're a student of them, not everybody's a fan, probably fewer today than there were before, but still somebody who is a very, very fascinating.
Bill
Arnold
Cosby.
Schwarzenegger.
Oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, yeah. I mean, are fewer people a fan once he got political and ran California for a bit? Or
That, I think, the infidelities and some other stuff.
Sure.
He's a complicated guy, but Arnold was this skinny Austrian kid that decided that he wanted to be famous, and he didn't know what that outlet was going to be. He wanted to be a skier, but he wasn't going to be the best skier. Wanted to be a soccer player, wasn't going to be the best soccer player. He wanted to be a strong man and was very strong with, admittedly, considerable amount of chemical enhancement. He does not shy from that at all now. But then he realized that he only had a limit there. But then he found that bodybuilding was going to be his thing. That he searched for a thing that fit him best, rather than latch on to the one thing that he wanted. He found something that wanted him as much as he wanted it. But his mantra was, when he went into the gym, and he is a very intelligent guy. You listen to him talk, you follow course of what he's done. This is a guy that, to do what he's done, you cannot just be a dumb guy. You got to have a lot of intelligence behind what you're doing. His mantra was, and he got made fun of for this, but was, don't think, just do it. Don't think, just do it. And what he's basically saying is, when it comes into like going to the gym, don't think about going to the gym. Go to the gym. If you want to go do 10, push-ups, just go do 10 push-ups. The more you think about it, the more time you spend I'm bending words here. The more time you think trying to come up with reasons to do this or to not do this, you will come up with reasons not to do it. And if you want to if I need to get something done, if I have to write or whatever, you know what I do? I do a loop, a mental loop. I don't go through a lot of reasons to motivate. I just sit down at my computer, open up my screen, and I start it. I don't think about anything else. I don't put any other distractions in there. I just, oh, not the TM article, please, Bryce. It's the worst example you could possibly put up there. I just go do it, and that's the whole idea of just do it. Is like, don't. If you give yourself, if you're intelligent, people will come up with excuses, will come up with reasons not to do it. The longer you think about it, the longer you look for an excuse to get past it. How do you, if you want to go for a walk, put on your damn walking shoes. If you want to go to the gym, put on your gym clothes. Don't think about it. Don't try to talk yourself into it. Get rid of that.
Well, and having said that, there are practical things you can do outside of, and yes, the perfect solution is to, well, just shut up and do it. However, as the cliche goes, the perfect is the enemy of the good. I think there are good structures that you can set up for yourself. And as my dad often told me, nothing inspires creativity like a deadline. And I would go a step farther and realize nothing inspires compromise like a deadline, which sounds like a bad thing, but compromise can be a very, very good thing if it's the difference between something happening and not happening. Committing yourself to by Friday, having called 20 places to see if anyone wants a free sample show to book your stage show or whatever. When that deadline comes, you will either have done it or not. And if you're somebody who's uncomfortable with saying you're going to do a thing and then not actually doing it, you will compromise. And you'll look at your list of people and say like, well, I did have ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox on my list, but I don't really know who to call at those places. And it is Thursday night and tomorrow's going to be Friday and I'll either done it or not. So let me open up the Yellow Pages, as if we live in an age where the Yellow Pages were relevant. Let me open up Yelp and type in comedy clubs, and the Yuck Yuck Chuckle Hut is right here in town, or it's an hour away. It's not my perfect solution, but if it's a matter of either I called them or I didn't call them, I will call these less perfect venues because I know they're much smaller and I'm much more likely to get to a decision maker immediately, and at least I'll have come down on the side of having followed through on that stuff. So failing the ability to just muscle up the gumption to go out and do a thing, at least set up a structure that forces you to a binary position where either you did it or didn't do it, and it allows for, even if you did it with compromise, it wasn't the perfect version, but at least it was done. At the end of the day, you did it instead of sitting around talking about it. That's the one thing you don't want to be, is the guy who's constantly talking about the solutions he's gonna implement to fix a thing in the future eventually.
I certainly agree to the latter. I would say that I think that there is, and I'm going to be very artificially binary here. I think there are zeros and ones. There are people I know who get things done, and there are people I know who don't. And the people who do struggle still with getting things done, but when they set themselves to do it, they end up getting it done. And then there are people who are very good at inventing excuses and compromising those compromises and compromising those compromises, and they put themselves into shame spirals and they don't get anything done.
Well,
and
I guess just to clarify, when I say compromise, for example, I had an idea for a routine in which I would make a ghost appear on the cell phone of every person in the audience, and I committed to myself to, like, come hell or high water, in 3 days, I'm going to perform this at the local Magic Club meeting. I had a perfect vision of what this would look like, and I had a demonstration of the technology that would make it possible. Up against a deadline, I had to compromise. I didn't have a perfect script. I didn't go through 5 revisions like I thought I would. I didn't tell an amazing detailed story that inspired everyone. But at the end of the day, as raw as that thing was, and as bare bones as that routine was, I did it, and I made that thing appear in front of them. And so that's what I mean by compromise.
Yeah, but you didn't start off with a compromise. You got to the point where you took it as far as you could, and that's the key, is to say that if and I guess that's the danger, is that if you say, okay, I'm a big believer, like, have a loose enough, have a mark that if 3 days prior you would say, yes, if I hit within the circle, it's a success. I know what the center of that circle is going to look like, and I'm going to shoot for as close as I can, but if I hit within that circle, I will be happy.
Correct.
And that's like when I talk about writing deadlines for people. I'm like, yeah, 2,000 words a day is great, but you know what you should be happy with? If you just sit down every day and at least write one word. If you can do that, and we've talked about Power of Habit, that book's fantastic. You know, you do that for 40 days. I was getting sloppy with my writing habits, so I made a commitment every day for 40 days without a day off. I sat down and I wrote 2,000 words a day.
This ties back to your theme of binary zeros and ones. When I say compromise, pretty much going from 0 to 1, 0 to anything is the hardest thing, because pretty much everything after you've gone to something is a matter of fidelity, and that's fine. You could be very, very far off in terms of fidelity, but as long as you made that leap from 0 to something, then that's the standard that you should at least hold yourself to.
When I knew 10 years ago that I wanted to get on TV and I wanted to have a TV show, I made a commitment that when I woke up in the morning, the first goal that I had to do was to move that closer, was to move myself closer to that finish line.
Do literally anything, whether it was making a list of people that you intended to call that day on a piece of paper or something.
Yeah, it was that everything else was secondary to that priority. If there was something that I knew that I could be doing, making the calls, making the video, or doing whatever, that came first. Everything else was secondary, to the point that if I didn't get enough done in a week, I would not go out on a Friday night. You know, I would not go out. And to the point I was uncomfortable hanging out or doing things if I didn't do enough. That was when I knew I was on a path to probably achieve success or spectacular flame out, was when I reached that point where I was uncomfortable if I wasn't pursuing. And that's where I got with writing. I got to the point where, like, and I was super like, I need to be able to figure out how to slip into that mode as easily as I can. When I got to that point where I felt uneasy, I could not go to sleep if I didn't write. And we talk about, like, 40 days is roughly the period of time of doing something every single day that it takes to build a habit.
So, and by the way, that's as far as we know, fairly scientifically determined, in that what was the experiment? They asked people to commit to a thing and just say every day, just self-report, like, did you do the thing or not? And then that's the balance they figured out, is beyond 40 days, you had diminishing returns. Pretty much, if you were going to do a thing, you did it for 40 days and then it stuck forever, right?
Yeah. You know, and the way that I've been spending a lot of time with code lately, so I tend to think about things in that sort of context. If you have a really long program, there's the greater chances you're going to have a bug or something's going to derail what you're trying to do. And the more time you spend trying to think about what you're going to do or build an elaborate plan, the more opportunities there are going to be to derail yourself. And I've talked about this in my books, you know, The Cure for Writer's Block and How to Write a Novella in 24 Hours. The biggest problem when you're a creative person is you can always create an out. You can always create a better solution for you to get out of it. That's very much where you can say, this is my plan. I'm going to go make this movie. I'm going to do this. 2 weeks in, production's rough. Your extras aren't showing up. People aren't participating the way that you hoped. You're like, you know what? I got a better movie. I got a better idea.
Right.
You know what? I learned a lot. I got a better idea. I'm going to put this one down. I can come back to it, but I'm going to go do this thing, because I think this is really where what your goal is to finish a damn thing. It's like a book. People are like, I had this idea in another book. Like, you know what? If you never finish a book, you've never finished a book. The quality of the book is irrelevant to finishing your first damn book.
That's a really good point, man. Finish a damn anything. That's your goal. And one word you use, just like I want to defend compromise, I want to encourage people not to fall into the seductive trap of thinking about excuses. We all know that excuses are bad. We all know that, oh yeah, no, let's not make excuses or whatever. But nobody thinks of excuses, your own excuses, as excuses. What you should be, the way you self-delude yourself, the way you trick yourself into following into a trap, is by not calling them excuses, but instead explaining with really good reasons what's going on. Hey, you wanted to be on TV, Andrew. Have you called anyone today? No, Brian, I haven't. Why not? Well, I called 20 people the other day, and I'm waiting on a call back. And to which I say, that doesn't sound like an excuse. Those sound like really good reasons you haven't done anything today. And that is what's so seductive about it. Do not fall for reasons. Do not fall for that trap.
I'm going to tell you, like, I would say for the last 6 or 7 years of my life, I've never been bothered with the question of, like, what have you been up to? What's been going on? Because I feel like I've always been able to measurably move that forward. And sometimes it's not from external validation. You know, if it's it's neat to say, hey, I just got nominated for this award, or hey, this thing's selling really well. But I can just as equally say, oh, I just finished writing this book, or I finished doing this thing. And so I've always felt very good on my personal achievement level, because even more so with the stuff that the self-determined stuff. And I think that if you move yourself by those standards, you have a thing to build upon.
Yeah.
And so I answer the question from the chat room. Tinsel guy, what language am I learning? Ruby. Ruby's been the one I've been doing, and I've been using everything from Code Academy, Code School to Treehouse, and trying to get that through my head. Now I'm moving on to Rails.
That's another one of those traps that we fall into, is thinking that you only get one at bat, and that you don't want to finish a thing and have it be less than the awesomeness you imagine. Instead, you should not be thinking about your first movie or this one movie you're thinking of. You should be thinking, how good do I want to be at age 67? And what will my story be? Will my story be that at age 67, I took 40 plus years working on restarting, half finishing a bunch of movies, and then made one movie that was really good?
Yep.
Or should the story be, when you're 67, that I've done 675 films and they all were terrible except for the last 4 or 5, but all of them won Academy Awards? Not to. What I mean by that is my perspective has shifted. I look back over the grand total of Scam School, and there's a lot of Scam School episodes where I'm deeply disappointed in my own performance, or the environment that we performed in, or the material I felt like I didn't do justice to. But the volume gets turned down on all of that now that we're past 500 episodes of this thing. And if I'm 67 and we're up to 23,000 episodes of Scam School or whatever, and then like the last 7 are the best thing I ever did, I'm okay with that. But the difference is you've got to finish individual things to get there.
Yeah, if you have a process to get better and to improve, then you're in a good situation. The thing that kind of makes me roll my eyes is when people say I don't watch TV. I know for a reason that's irrelevant, but I don't watch TV. I just roll my eyes. I used to be the guy that says that, and that's non sequitur here. The other one is, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And when somebody tells me, like, oh, why don't you? It's like I'm a bit of a perfectionist. It's like, okay, so you're the only one in the world with taste. You're the only one in the world that cares about making things good. That sounds to me like you're a procrastinator. It sounds to me like you're a 0 out of 1. It sounds to me like you're a person looking for an excuse, and you're using the idea of like, well, yeah, no, I want it to be really good.
So restating it's what does it mean to be a perfectionist in that context? What they're really saying is, I'm somebody who would rather release nothing than release something that I'm worried I would take any kind of criticism for.
Yeah.
And guess what? The perfectionism that you seek does not exist. There is literally not any piece of art, certainly not art worth a damn, that you can release that somebody will not hate in this world. There is no perfect.
Yeah, and that's not an excuse to do crap at all. And sometimes means finishing it means just finishing it and then putting it on a shelf and moving on to the next thing. Sometimes that's maybe the right approach.
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess to James's question, figure out a way to hold yourself accountable, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, James, the thing to commit yourself to is don't think about how much time you do, but at least a time to say tomorrow you get up, whatever, you're going to spend the first hour of the day doing X, working on that thing. You have to understand that as part of what you need to do. And, we'll all attest to when you set out that list of 10 things you need to do the next day, and when you get them done, it feels amazing. So commit yourself to the idea of sitting down at some point. I'm going to stand here. Sometimes it might even mean have a different workspace, that when you sit down at this workspace, this is what you're going to do.
Can I just say there, that I love this idea of perfectionism in the 0 to 1 binary structure. When somebody says they're a perfectionist, they're saying I'd rather not release it than take criticism from it, or have it be, let's say, 60% good rather than 100% good. Yes, I understand that impulse, and I understand releasing stuff that you're not going to like afterwards or want to disown. But meanwhile, another way to put it is I'm so uncomfortable with taking criticism from the people who won't like what this is on track to be, that I would rather not release it and deny access to it to the 30% of my fans who will really, really dig it. And specifically, I remember a time that I was really excited because I had tracked down a bootleg of Penn and Teller's show. Was it Phobophilia? And there were parts of it that I really, really liked and I was really, really excited about. And I remember as a fan saying, oh man, I just saw Phobophilia. And before I got to say another word, Teller said, could have been a good show. Really disappointed with it. And all of a sudden I felt like a chump for having liked it. I had, and thank goodness they released it. Thank goodness that they were ones instead of zeros, right? And it's great that he had things that he was disappointed about, but somewhere out there is a Brian Brushwood, and specifically what made me think about this is Jackie Hearn in the chat room just pledged to release her hoarded claymation videos that she hadn't released because they suck. Fine. You may think they suck, and they may be miles short of where you wanted them to be. But out there is a Brian Brushwood who really wants to see them. And you decide which is more important, to avoid criticism by not doing anything, or to make that 30%, that lesser, that small amount of people happy by getting more of that stuff.
Or I mean, an alternative might be that if sometimes there are books that I should not release because people might read these things and then come to an unfair opinion of where I am now. But they might be things that I might let a small group of friends read, and this might be a thing that you might, show it to a group of friends, see what they say. It's like, oh, this is great. Like, oh, that's fun, whatever. The more important part is you got it done. You did it.
Yes.
You did it. And if you have enough information from there to move on to the next project, then that's great. If you got enough of that experiment, you have the results, you're like, haha, now I know how to iterate it, make it better, then that's great.
And that's a good point. I guess we're talking less about the releasing aspect but more about the completion of the thing. That's what really matters.
Yeah, and I think completion and having, I try to write down, like I've said it before, when I write a book, I'll then read a book on writing, and then I now get to a point where I write a book and then I will make notes about this book, what I thought I hit, what I didn't hit, and whatever. And a lot of times I can predict what the feedback might be from a publisher because I'm like, yeah, no, I know they're going to say this or whatever. And it's because I'm so familiar now with finishing things, I'm not too attached. If they don't like something, that's great. I can write more. And I think if we're getting that position, like, YouTube videos, guess what? You didn't like it this week? Watch next week.
Right.
Keep iterating. So do we have time for me to run a thought by you? A business plan?
Yeah, sure.
It's a bit half-baked, but
unlike everything else on this show.
Oh my God, I know. And it came from trying to address a pain point. I may have talked about little bits of this with you now, and I want to kind of bring this in front of a more public audience here and hear what their reactions to this are. One of the things I've noticed in 3D printing, whenever I've wanted to do projects, and sometimes it's very simple things. Sometimes it's things like I want to make something mechanical or make something, there are not, if you're in the consumer space, there are not a lot of very basic things like nuts or bolts or screws and things like that. You can go to Thingiverse and maybe somebody's made a few of those things, but maybe they've never printed them. But you would think at this point we would have like a virtual hardware store, that you could go and download, a lot of things that are 3D printable, but that has not happened yet in the consumer space.
And specifically, I think the reason that it hasn't happened is, number one, it's very pedestrian. Number two, the logic is that, well, whatever you make on a 3D printer won't be very stable. I wouldn't want to trust my, children's stroller to rely on this nut or bolt or whatever. But you're not talking about that. You're talking about, like, sometimes you want these things just to be a 20-minute stand-in for
no, a lot of them are very stable. A lot of them are very, that I think the reasons that you don't have them are, one is that all these repositories are crowdsourced, and you're relying on somebody to say, yeah, I will go through the effort to go produce this and then put this out there for everybody. And it's a lot like software in the early 1980s, or they're designer generated. Most 3D repositories it's just crap to hold your other crap. It's this, hey, look at the skull mug I made, or look at this I made. you don't know how qualitative the stuff is, and some 3D repositories are like, oh yeah, everything's tested. Like, well, somebody in the crowd uploads it, but maybe they don't tell you that, oh yeah, you shouldn't use standard PLA plastic because that harbors bacteria, and if you make a cup from this, you're going to get sick, because maybe they didn't know. And it's a tragedy of the commons in many ways, in that there's not a lot of incentivization there to put a lot of like a metric bolts, screws, things like this, angle brackets and all that. There's not an incentive to do that at this point. And my thought was to try to create a 3D repository that you could say, oh, I need a 3-inch screw with 20-inch 20 thread per inch count, whatever metric, blah blah blah, or imperial, these things, and to have basically replicate a hardware store in a repository.
Yeah, no, I think certainly there's value to that. The question, of course, becomes how do you leverage motivation of the internet. I would say that some kind of Reddit-like karma kind of situation where people can upvote or downvote would be helpful. If
Opposite way I would go.
Oh, really?
No, I want to get away from the crowd. That totally want to get away from that, because I think the problem is that
how do you incentivize people to point out stuff like the harboring bacteria in PLA mugs or whatever?
You don't. You basically create a firm or a company or something where you then have your own engineers and people and technicians who test it and work on this stuff. Okay. That's what you do, is that you basically say, instead of trying to create YouTube circa 2006, is you create Netflix, you create, created stuff that solves specific niches. Just say, okay, let's make bolts, let's test them, let's have our own people go test these things and make sure they work.
So
that would be
so in that regard, so I guess the question becomes, why discuss this on the After Things podcast? In what way can those can our audience be involved?
I don't know.
I'm
just
okay.
Throwing this out there, Brian.
I thought you were setting it up to be workshopped or to come up with a crowdsourced kind of answer or something.
I'm saying that, like, I think the solution to the problem is that, how would you build a company or build something along those lines? Like,
I see.
Like say, okay, so like, okay, let's create 1,000 of the most common things that can be printed in 1,000 items from a hardware store that can be reproduced. How would you replicate those? How would you do that? And then we're getting questions like Tensor Guy's asking questions like, how do you compete with mass produced stuff? Well, the answer is you don't. It depends. Is that you say, if you can there's a promise with a 3D printer. The promise when you buy this 3D printer is the idea that it becomes this wonderful cornucopia machine that you can produce these things that you need. But the reality is you go look at 3D repositories, you find things that are untested, you find that they're crappy, you find that it's just tons of crap. Like you see these, like I see repositories, we got 30,000 items. Yeah, 20,000 of them are iPhone 4 holders.
Sure.
So, and the idea is like, how do you deliver on that promise? And I think step one on that promise is the idea of, emotionally overcome here as I cough, is creating a repository of extremely practical stuff, like, nuts and bolts and things like that you can use in certain criteria. There are many different kinds of filament now. In the last 5 years, we've gone from simple PLA things to nylon, to actually there are now carbon materials that you can use, carbon fiber printers.
So, okay, so can I make a couple suggestions? Because I think I see where you're headed now. If what you are offering is increased or superior models with more thought put into them that will be more practical and more usable, I like your parallel of a Netflix versus a YouTube. I think one of the things you need to do is similar to Netflix or maybe an Audible, is you need to monetize in that people are spending money to get things. But I would figure out some scheme to have a monthly membership to a club. Either an all-you-can-eat buffet a la Netflix, or an Audible style. You get a number of credits, and it's like, hey man, you get 100 credits to spend, and maybe a screw design is 2 credits, and maybe I don't know, complicated valve is 5 credits or whatever.
And I think that's on the nose exactly. And so this is, and I'm glad to hear you iterate that, because this was my thinking, is one level is I wanted to create like a service that's useful for everybody and it could be free, and then I'll create a freemium level so anybody could have anybody can have access to these designs or models or things like that. Okay, anybody can have access to this. And Tensor guys, are you thinking of printing stuff yourself and shipping? No, the point is if you have a 3D printer, you use it to make it. The idea is if you have a 3D printer and you want a 3/4 inch screw to fix some project or whatever, you have this file ready to go and print it. That's the whole idea, is that it's a repository of a lot of things you'd get in a hardware store, but it turns your 3D printer into a hardware store. So on one level, you would have maybe like a free level, which would have like, the 1,000 most common items in a hardware store. The next level up gets into a little more sophisticated stuff, things that are gadgets, things like that. Some of the stuff you've seen like I've made before, and that might be like the $4.99 a month level kind of thing, okay? That might be like the level that pays for making these other things free. And so that one level, just to create something kind of like a thing to help humanity, is this idea of, hey, here's a thing that you can plug in your 3D printer in. You could even get into more complex stuff like an API where you could create a URL string that could describe the length and width of whatever of a screw or bolt you needed.
Sure.
And it could auto-generate that. But then to make it, actually function as a, as a service with updated stuff is, you need some sort of profit model.
So okay, so the profit model. Try this on for size. Tell me. I know that when I first said it, because it wasn't what you were thinking of, I said crowdsource. But I wonder if there's a way to get what you want and still leverage the passionate nature of the internet. So what if, let's say, everyone can peruse anything for free, right? Everyone can participate in all the forums for free. For $4.99, you become a member. And once you're a member, you can, spend credits to download the X, Y, and Z things. But what if there were credit bounties for things people wanted? For example, let's say at the freemium level, everybody can take a picture of a thing they need replicated. And then, and let's say there's some kind of free voting, like, oh, that would be cool if that screw is available, or no, I don't think that's important, or whatever. But if you're a member, and let's say you're the person who designs that screw, it goes through the submission engine, it's vetted by whatever, and if it's found of a sufficient quality, you're awarded a 5 credit bounty. So now you're paying $5 a month just to be in the clubhouse, but now you're leveraging additional effort and building and leveraging karma and reputation and that kind of stuff.
So the model I have is, instead of getting away from the credit model and all that, is that you have one level. It's like pay one monthly fee, you get access to kind of everything. The other side of it, but would be a separate site even, is to put out bounties to say we're looking for camera attachments for iPhones, we're looking for this, and just pay cash. Just pay cash as an incentive, is get away, because the bounty and point system's only going to have a value to people if you're at a certain scale. But realistically, even Amazon's tried doing that kind of incentive level, and it doesn't work for doing certain kinds of things. There are sites where you have people who are like, say, hey, I will do 3D service for $10 an hour or whatever. But you say, hey, we want a new multi-tool that can be totally 3D printable. We'll pay $1,000 if you can, sell us this design. Or we'll work out, Amazon has their KDP program, which basically is, if I put a book into the KDP program unlimited for, they say every month they have, like this month it's like $15 million. They could divide it up by the total number of page views. And so you can say, oh, this month we've got a $5 million bounty for whatever there. But the goal is you want to make sure you have quality stuff in there. So in every one of these repositories, it's a bunch of crowdsourced crap to hold other crap, and it gets flooded with stuff. If you type in Bolt into one of these things, you get a bunch of things that aren't what you want. You can't find what you want. It's problematic. And look, Bryce typed in Bolt, and the first thing on the upper right, we do have a Bolt, but it's just a sample thing. It's not like a specific whatever. It's the generic MakerBot. This is what a Bolt would look like.
So I don't want to get into any kind of debate, but just to clarify, part of the reason that I'm attracted to doing credits instead of actual cash bounties is if you're a talented modeler and you see the it's that economic view where once cash is brought into the equation, it becomes a transaction, and people start to evaluate, well, is an hour of my time really worth $35? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I want to do it. But whereas credits, it does, because I do feel like most of the people who are modeling and doing effort in the 3D space feel like they're part of a movement. And as long as it's not a crass cash transaction, I feel like you might be able to leverage more effort. But that's
but my
entirely
point is that's been
speculative.
the problem is that I would rather there's a lot of designers, not a lot of engineers. I would rather how do I leverage people who are not participating because the quality of stuff in the last 5 years hasn't gone up that much. And that's why let's create a Netflix model instead of a YouTube.
Got it. So you're saying all of a sudden let's make auteurs out of these people. Let's make true artisans out of them. Or demand
engineers.
only those.
It's too much design, not enough engineering.
Yeah.
And I would say let's go to some kids, some guys in college and girls in college, and some people who are working engineering degrees and things like that, and say, hey, we'll pay you $3,000 for a better Vice if you can come up with this thing, or we'll create this profit sharing. Let's incentivize people who are not participating. Open software versus early 1980s. There was a lot of great free. It was a lot of tools for tools. Not in like the late 70s, early, a lot of tools for tools, not a lot of this is how you get stuff done. And that's like, how do we move it into the next level?
Open Bayou has a really good point in the chat. He points out that Stack Overflow does a bounty system. I think Stack Overflow is in a world where Stack Overflow has become the de facto grading tool for one's programming skills. And there are people who will not hire you unless you have a sufficient Stack Overflow reputation. I think doing a Stack Overflow of 3D engineering could be like when what you're really doing is saying, hey, you're going to work really hard. You're going to design a lot of stuff. A lot of it's not going to get used. But at the end of the day, in 5 years, your skills are going to be very much in demand based on your based on your reputation on this platform.
Yeah, there are a lot of different directions to go into. And I think the problem is that for a lot of people, they get a 3D printer and they want to be able to make things, and they go online to repositories and they get GitHub when what they want is the App Store.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Hey man, we're creeping up on time. We're about to have to get ready for. I don't know if you heard, but we're up for a podcast award.
Yes.
They're going to have that.
I will do part 2 of this discussion next week. So
okay, awesome, dude. Very very good stuff. Do you have picks?
I do have a pick.
Yes.
Pick is the book Hackers by Stephen Levy.
Oh, I haven't read that one. Stephen Levy also did Inside the Googleplex, right?
Yeah, and Hackers is sort of the whole or a story of a lot of the people that you never maybe heard of in the community of creating, how do we get to where we are now with software? And it's fascinating too because it's this, you look at from the early days of, early days in the 1950s of, where computation started to come faster and faster, people working with the old school, the TX0 computer, and like, what was the first video game? And people say Space War, but arguably it was Mouse in a Maze, which came before. And, you get into the sort of this history of that, and kind of as a weird touchback into that is I was at the Magic Castle Friday night. I took Justin and his friends there, and there's a magician there by the name of Norman Galbraith who has, 80 years old, and we know him from the Galbraith method.
Yeah.
Principle. He performed for us. Sweet old man. And I'm listening to this book, and they're talking about the guy named Donald Knuth who put together a big book explaining different programming techniques. And this principle, which is a magic technique but also a sorting type thing, is in that book. And it's sort of this weird thing. And to hear Marvin Minsky talked about, Marvin's a person that I knew. And just a fascinating sort of thing to think of how ancient it sounds, but how recent it is. You talk about like the programming language of Lisp and how one of the creators of that is still with us. Yeah. Yet in some ways it feels like ancient history.
The Galbraith principle, tell me if I'm remembering this correctly, it's like if you have an entire deck of cards sorted red, black, red, black, red, black, you can shuffle that deck of cards, and no matter how you riffle shuffle it, if you pull off 2 cards off the top, they will always be 1 red and 1 black, although the order might swap. That's the Galbraith principle, right?
Something like that.
That's
methods.
What? Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know. It's a mathematical. That's an interesting thing. Like, what's the difference between a magic method and a mathematical axiom? Or interesting. Okay, my pick is "Ego Is the Enemy" by Ryan Holiday. This was a very challenging book for me to read. I did not expect this. It is relentless in its. It challenged me very, very hard in that it made me question how much. First of all, it makes a very, very good case for why making egotistical decisions is not a good business.
Like choosing it 2 weeks in a row.
Yes. Well, I mean, now I've actually read it though. That's the difference.
Okay.
But I mean, one of the things is it explains why letting ego get in the way oftentimes results in extremely poor business decisions. The other thing is there's a lot of case studies of people who have let ego get in their way and other people who have overcome ego. One of the, of course, most prominent stories is Steve Jobs. Very much left Apple, over ego. It was a clash of egos between the two of them, and he left to start his own thing. And his return, in many ways, was him conquering ego. From being the guy who would park in handicapped parking places because he could, to becoming the guy who, with a heart of in spirit of trying to save fledgling Apple, came back and knocked it out of the park. There's also a lot of quotes from Greek philosophers and Roman philosophers, and you're hearing from Plutarch and Stoicism and so on. But the entire time, I found myself really comparing various decisions I made with business, like asking, was that truly because this mattered, or was this because I had built up a picture of who I am and I needed to match that picture for fear of not looking consistent or any other stupid, irrelevant thing. And my favorite part out of the whole thing was in the audiobook, there's a 1-hour interview between him and Tim Ferriss at the end, where something you don't get a lot of in the book is him talking about his personal experiences. And instead, for some reason, hearing him say many of the same things in the books framed as actual events that he went through with his work, both working out and consulting for the board at American Apparel or whatever, and the difficulties and the panic attacks he had, and the lack of proper prioritization. It was really, really challenging, really, really good, and I think ultimately something I needed to hear, as difficult as it was, and I highly, highly recommend it.
That's good. We get the version of events often after it happens, and we always get the version of events after it happens, how we recall them and how we got there. And we want to tell the story where everything sort of makes sense. And we want to be the personal journey, to be the one where we've completed the journey.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Is that, I guess that, if I'm going to sit down and tell you the story of how I got to here, I'm going to assume that here is really the place that I need to end up being, and not the fact that I'm really far away from where.
Well, and one of my favorite parts of the book was when he talks about, and again, the case studies are extraordinary. He talks about military commanders that you've never heard of, but that were unarguably some of the most important people in all of shaping history. And I forget the name of was it Marshall? I think it was Marshall who refused to sit down, or he sat down for commissioned paintings of him. But then the moment it was over, he got up, and the painter said to General Marshall, "Well, don't you want to see the painting?" And he goes, "Nope," and then off he went. And it's like, it talks about the benefits of why you should aspire to be that kind of person, because it's somebody who focuses on what truly is important and enjoys the benefits of doing the thing that is what really matters, not from the trappings or what other people do things, because ultimately none of that matters. Anyway, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, that sounds great. One of my heroes is George Washington, and who was a guy that said, "Hey, I don't really want a monument. I think this thing we built here is really awesome, and I'm happy being associated with that." And we're like, "Okay, no monument, but we're gonna give him a giant phallic symbol."
Yes, exactly. One other point that's in the book that I thought was really poignant was he talks about people who are consumed with slights from years and years and years ago. And in fact, there's a fantastic story about how William Randolph Hearst heard about Citizen Kane and heard that it's kind of maybe about him. And of course, Charles Foster Kane was an amalgam of a bunch of different people. William Randolph Hearst lost
But mostly Hearst.
well, okay, that's fine. But he lost his crap. He said nobody will ever mention an RKO Pictures anything on any Hearst publication ever, and kept to it. And just this insane stuff. And it leads to this one moment that apparently really happened where Orson Welles was in an elevator with Charles Foster Kane, or I'm sorry, with William Randolph Hearst, and as they're going up, he was like, oh yeah, hey, you want to come see the movie? The premiere's on so and so, and William Randolph Hearst is like, no, I'll never see your movie. And then Orson Welles goes, huh, Charles Foster Kane would have, and then left the elevator. It's so many great moments because Orson Welles was somebody who truly kept his eye on what was really important and didn't get lost in the other stuff, whereas William Randolph Hearst, did get lost in all that stuff. Anyway, lots of great stories.
Yeah. Brian?
You?
Bryce? It's been after. Have you watched Magician yet?
No. Tell me about Magician.
Magician.
That's the Orson Welles biography.
No.
Is
It's a movie?
Yeah, documentary, yeah.
Documentary. Magician documentary. Oh, is that on Netflix?
Amazon Prime, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Right on.
Good shows, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you,
really
Brian.
good time.
If you're watching us live, stay tuned. In about an hour, the podcast awards will be up. I don't know. I'm going to talk to Sergeant Muffin because it seems like he's got a stream set up for it. So maybe we'll just call him because I think he has like overlays and stuff. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Okay, and do you know like what's the expectation as far as like watching it and being available if one of our podcasts were to win like
a brief acceptance.
okay, but
message?
Skyping in or
Yeah, we'll call them.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to watch their stream and then call them when we hear ourselves. And so
Got it. And then be brought in. Yeah.
and then be brought in.
Yeah, got it.
So
Okay, cool. Well then
What
in
a
that case,
strange world.
yeah.
amazing.
All right, guys. We will
I'm going to go lay down.
Yeah, so
lay
to clarify, Sergeant Muffin makes a good point. It says trying to Skype out while being live in your studio might be too much. So we will not be live, but we will be watching it live and possibly making an appearance on it. That's correct? Like we're not going to be streaming our sitting here watching it, are we?
We don't have to. I also forgot that Justin wasn't here, so I thought that might be a fun thing with everybody.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But,
yeah, we'll just all plan on watching his stream
okay.
and then calling in.
We'll figure that out. We'll have to shut the stream down anyway. But thank you guys for watching. Hopefully next week it will be the podcast awards winner.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, hate to be the losers that, show up next week without that.
You know what? If that's the case, we'll show up and we'll say, what podcast awards? I don't remember ever hearing about them.
Didn't matter.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Mwah. Mwah.
Good night.